Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Gerald Owens in for David Crabtree.
And I'm Deborah Morgan. For years, police turned to technology to gather evidence against known criminal suspects.
Tonight, our WRAL Investigates team uncovers the growing trend to track hundreds, even thousands of cell phones near a crime scene in hopes of finding a suspect. Cullen Browder joins us in the newsroom with the story. And Cullen, the source is well known.
It is, Gerald. If you get on the computer, you've used Google to search for anything and everything. Well, Google collects information far beyond what we can all type in that search box. Raleigh police and many other agencies are now getting search warrants to ask Google to help identify potential suspects. And a key question is, where is that privacy line?
A 5-alarm emergency lights up the Raleigh skyline. The fire at an under-construction apartment is the largest in the city's history. Almost 3 years ago, Raleigh police responded to a shots fired call on St. Albans. When they arrived, they found Adrian Pugh dead just inside the front door of his home. In July of 2016, Garrett Bridges was shot and killed during a home invasion in Clayton. And last year, 2 females reported being assaulted by a man in North Raleigh on 2 separate occasions. One of the victims, a Wakefield High School student walking to school. 4 cases with one thing in common: no arrests. And with investigators at a dead end, they turn to Google looking for a lead.
We certainly have seen an increase in that kind of information in cases.
Wake County District Attorney Lauren Freeman says the use of technology data is becoming more frequent by investigators and prosecutors. We found at least 5 local cases where investigators asked Google for information to help them catch a crook. In 2 cases, witnesses or surveillance video showed persons of interest with a cell phone in their hands. Investigators said location data collected by Google could help them identify who was holding those phones at the crime scenes at a certain time of day.
We generally try to be as narrow as possible in seeking investigative information.
The Google search warrant in the death of Garrett Bridges asked for people who search for addresses where Bridges lived. But it's the search warrants for the Raleigh fire and the sexual assaults that worry some people.
The first impression is that they were overly broad.
Stephen Sod is a defense attorney and a former prosecutor. He feels asking Google for data on all devices near those crime scenes is troublesome.
If you know that a crime was committed in an area and you have no information on a suspect, would you allow for them to go through every house in the neighborhood? Of course not.
Sod questions whether the search warrants violate people's privacy by tracking their movements.
And I don't think that people are expecting Google to allow the government to see those types of trends.
And we're not getting, text messages or emails or phone calls or things without having to go through a different process.
Freeman argues investigators aren't getting personal information on phone owners yet, just where the phones were. She says throwing the wide net to look for information is no different than a police checkpoint when looking for evidence of a crime.
This is in some ways just an iteration of other types of investigative techniques that may have been used, historically.
This is almost the opposite technique, where they get a search warrant in the hopes of finding somebody later to follow or investigate.
Sod isn't sold, though. He also wonders how this high-tech evidence would hold up in court.
Because a device was present or an IP address linking that device to a location is there in the case, does that really mean that that person was there?
While the debate burns whether these high-tech search warrants are smart policing or an invasion of privacy, Freeman says the use of smart device data to unlock cold cases will likely increase.
As the technology changes, as more and more is known about what the technology is capable of and what information is collected, I think you are seeing some new and different investigative techniques used.
Google records show the company received about 5,200 search warrants in just the first half of last year, and Google supplied some data to law enforcement 81% of the time. My colleague Tyler Dukes went much deeper on this story, including how to turn on and off the location history on your phone. You can find his story at WRAL.com. Gerald.
Boy, that is fascinating. Thanks, Cullen.